What is up, Formula One fans? This is James from the Formula One Bros podcast, bringing you another episode. This is our second episode of the 2025 season, our fourth season ongoing. And today we bring you our review of the Australian Grand Prix. Now, I have made some notes with some takeaways from the race, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to talk about my takeaways from the race. My brother Chris sent me some of his takeaways from the race as well, and we'll talk about that. I don't need to give any sort of like play-by-play for the race because I'm assuming we all watched the race. So what I'm doing with this race review episode is to just talk about my personal takeaways from the race, what I think, what's happening, what is going on, and then I'll also I'm going to mention for some teams or drivers who may not have done well today, I'm going to talk about who should be hitting the panic button and who should not be hitting the panic button yet. But it is only the first race, but I believe there are some teams and or drivers or fans who maybe should be hitting the panic button a little bit, even though it is just the first race. But we got the first race out of the way, and man, both my brother and I said this with the Australian Formula One race. This race is why Australia needs to be the season opener every year. It was a awesome race. Now, it got a little bit boring towards the middle there. It got a little bit boring, but man, the beginning of the race was awesome, and especially the end of the race with the rain and the different strategies. And oh my gosh, it was a chaotic race. It reminds me of the chaotic race that we had in Australia in 2010 when we had Bahrain first, and that Bahrain race in 2010 was really boring, and everyone was about to write off Formula One that season being super, super boring. Then we get to Australia and had a banger of a race in 2010. I remember watching that. It was crazy. And then now, Australia being the season opener, we had another banger of a race. It was awesome. So I'm just going to go through my takeaways, and I'll talk about Chris's takeaways as well, and talk about where we stand. The first takeaway, the first thing that I wrote down, rough start for Duan and Hajar. Now, I'm going to extend that to pretty much the rookies. The rookies had quite the eventful race today. In fact, the only rookie that seemed to have had a pretty decent race, and in fact they had a fantastic race, was Kimi Antonelli. All the other rookies, it was baptism by fire. Here you go. Here's your first race in an F1 car. It's wet. Have fun. The only one that actually had like experience, I think, of all the rookies, not the only one that had experience, but the one rookie who has the most experience being Liam Lawson. I was kind of surprised at his performance this weekend. All throughout the weekend, qualifying was not good, and then especially in the race, started at the back, couldn't make his way up to the front, and then towards the end, DNF spun out and hit the wall. To be fair, it was a wet track and he was on slicks. So I think even the most seasoned driver probably would have made any sort of mistake. And a lot of the drivers at the end of the race were saying how they were lucky to get to the end. They were happy to just get to the end. Especially the likes of Lewis Hamilton and a couple other drivers. But yeah, not a great race for the rookies at all. But again, if you're a fan of any of the rookies, I don't think you need to be hitting the panic button. I don't think you need to be hitting the panic button at all. If you're a fan of any of these rookies, it was the first race. I think if there's any of the rookies that you need to hit the panic button for, I think the one that has the biggest argument to hit the panic button for is Liam Lawson, which I'll talk about that in a sec when it comes to him and Yuki. But yeah, not a great day for the rookies. I'm hoping that if China can be a dry race, I think it'll be a much better race for the rookies. But yeah, what a race for the rookies, man. Did not go well. And again, Kimi Antonelli was the only one that did well, and he did well. He delivered. So that's my takeaway for number one. My takeaway for number 2 is a pretty quiet. This person was never really mentioned, but a really decent race from Nico Hulkenberg. He at the very beginning of the race, he jumped 5 spots, and he finished in 7th. So really, really strong showing from Nico Hulkenberg. I was really, really surprised considering I picked Kick Sauber to finish last this year, which I'll talk about my team predictions now that we've seen a race. I'll talk about my team predictions at the end. But yeah, really, really strong race for Nico Hulkenberg. His teammate, I mean, he was one of the rookies that crashed out. I feel really bad for him. It was just a chaotic race from start to finish with the wets versus dries and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, really, really great race from Nico Hulkenberg. I'm really happy for him. I'm hoping that isn't just a one-off for him finishing in the points. I really hope that isn't for him. It isn't just a one-off for him. I still believe that he is a really, really talented driver. That I think if he were to be in one of the top cars, I think he could easily have the talent to finish on the podium. But yeah, really great job from Nico Hulkenberg. My third takeaway, and this is huge. I made a video about this and posted it on TikTok as it was happening. But despite Carlos Sainz not finishing the race, despite him crashing out in the first couple laps, this weekend as a whole, from Friday, first practice, all the way through to the checkered flag on Sunday, Williams can count this as a huge win. Now, there is some bittersweetness to it because I think had Carlos not crashed out in the first couple laps and had he finished, I think both cars could have been in the points and they should have been in the points. But even with his DNF, man, Alex Albon had an incredible weekend. Carlos Sainz even had an incredible weekend, just got really, really unlucky with spinning out. And I don't think that was a skill issue at all. I think it was just his car hit a patch of water, revved up the torque, and car spun out. But yeah, both. So going off of that for the whole weekend, I mean, all in all, it was a great weekend. They were great in every single every single session they were great, and both drivers made it to Q3. I don't think that happened at all last year. Both drivers making it to Q3. I can't remember the last time both Williams made it to Q3 in qualifying. So this was a huge accomplishment for them. And I went into this season predicting that if there was a team that was going to make the most improvements, it was going to be Williams. And right now, man, they look like they are on fire. Alex finished in the points, and I really do. I have written down here, if Carlos had finished, I think he also would have finished in the points. And after one race, Alex Albon has 10 points for the team. Last year, total for the entire season, Williams scored 17 points. So already, after just one race, Williams has over half the amount of points that they had throughout the entire season last year. So hats off to Williams. Hats off to Williams. Now, I know I said at the beginning of the season, it is only the first race. There's still a lot of racing left to do. There's still 22 races left. There's still a lot of season left. We go from now, it is March. We go from March all the way through to December. That's a lot of racing to come. But I think if there's any teams that should feel really, really encouraged after this weekend, it should be Williams. And also McLaren, but I'll talk about that later. But yeah, great weekend for Williams. Just, I feel so gutted for Carlos, not able to get to the end, because I think Williams have built a competitive car. So my next takeaway, my fourth takeaway, I have written down in my notes, what did Kimi Antonelli eat for breakfast? He started towards the back. He ended up finishing P4. He crossed the line. He originally had a penalty. He crossed the line P4. He had a penalty applied, so that would have put Alex Albon in fourth, him in fifth. But they reversed that. Kimi Antonelli finishes in fourth. What a great weekend. And then George Russell also finishing on the podium. So they finished third and fourth. Very, very impressed by Mercedes today. They're another team who really, really impressed me today. Again, it's only the first race, but very, very encouraging coming from Mercedes. But Kimi Antonelli, when all of the other rookies either crashed out or were finishing at the back, man, Kimi Antonelli delivered a fourth place finish. And Mercedes historically in this new era of Formula One that we've had with the ground effect cars have been nowhere. They've been nowhere after dominating the hybrid, the V6 turbo hybrid era. With the ground effect now in the new cars starting in 2022, they've been nowhere. And they're finally starting to really claw themselves back out of the hole. And man, Kimi Antonelli, what an incredible drive. Being able to finish up in fourth. I do think strategy played a lot into that, but I mean, you have to have the skill to be able to put your car in the right spot at the right time. So hats off to Kimi Antonelli when all of the other rookies were either out or finishing at the back. Kimi Antonelli really, really delivered. So really, really fantastic job from Kimi. Hats off to you. I think Mercedes are in a really good spot. And I'll talk about more of the team when I do my predictions for the rest of the season. But of all the drivers that I thought were going to do the best this weekend, I thought Liam Lawson was going to be up at the top, and he would finish of the top of the rookies. But man, Kimi Antonelli, what an incredible drive from him. He was very patient. He had a pretty quiet race. It was very patient from him. And he just made the right moves where he needed to make the right moves and put himself in a position to capitalize on others' misfortune and capitalize on good strategy. And that's what great racers do. And so I think he has a very bright future at Mercedes. They played the strategy beautifully. Great race from George. Very patient from Kimi. So well done, Mercedes. So I've done a couple positive takeaways, and I'm going to go to the biggest heartbreak of them all. I have written down classic Ferrari. 1-2, 10 laps before the end of the race, and they screw it up. So they were all weekend. It was not a good weekend for Ferrari at all. Even during qualifying and practice sessions, they were overheating the tires. They just couldn't get the tires set up right. They couldn't get the car set up right. Both drivers were complaining it was difficult to drive all weekend long. Even Lewis was, he gave a pretty not great interview at the end, talking about how it was really difficult to drive. It was really discouraging. And, you know, the Italian team, Ferrari, they're very proud of their image, and having Lewis say those things, I don't think they're going to be too happy about it. I mean, but Lewis isn't wrong. Not wrong. It's classic Ferrari. They're driving based off of reputation of the past. And yeah, it was just, they made terrible strategy calls. The radio comments were just idiotic. There was one that was like, hey, Charles was like, hey, I'm like sitting in a puddle of water right now. I know it's raining, but like I'm sitting in a puddle of water. And they're like, it's probably water. Yeah, just not great at all. Now, I'm not hitting the panic button yet. I talked about that, how there are some teams that need to hit the panic button, some drivers that need to hit the panic button, or fans that need to hit the panic button. I think with Ferrari, and this is probably me just being hopeful and biased because I'm a Ferrari fan, I'm not hitting the panic button just yet, but my hand is hovering over it, ready to press the panic button at a moment's notice. Like thumb over the button, ready to press it. I'm not hitting the panic button yet. It is only race one. Again, there's a lot of season left. I'm thinking back at that, how the coin, it was flipped on the other side of the coin in 2022. They ended the first race in Bahrain 1-2. We thought, yes, Ferrari's back, they're winning the championship, and then we remember how they absolutely butchered the 2022 season. So I'm not hitting the panic button yet, but this was a very, very bad race for Ferrari. Not making right strategy calls. They got the setup of the car all wrong. Just overall, they looked like a mess. And I had predicted them to win the Constructors Championship this year. And I'll talk about my placement at the end, but even after this race, again, like I said, I'm not hitting the panic button, but they are not ready to fight for a title. They are not ready. Just mentally as a team, they're not ready to fight for a title. They have the car, they have the drivers, but them as a team, they're not ready. They are not ready. They're making terrible decisions. Yeah, it sounds like I'm hitting the panic button, but I promise I'm not. I'm not yet. I'm not writing this season off yet, because they did, towards the end, they did put themselves in a position, 10 laps to go. They were 1-2. And they just made the wrong calls. And I think had they gone in for intermediate tires when everyone else had, I think they would have been right there at the end, to pick up some good points. So yeah, that is that's my take on Ferrari. Not a great look for them at all. Not a great weekend for them. I'm hoping things can get better. I think for me as a Ferrari fan, I'm not going to start hitting the panic button until after we get through Japan. If China and Japan go how Australia went, then I'm going to start hitting the panic button for Ferrari. Ferrari should start hitting the panic button. But I'm hoping we can get through China and Japan. We can have some decent results. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those next two races go. All right, back on the positive, another takeaway. My fifth takeaway, or sixth takeaway, Yuki Tsunoda. Statement made. What a great weekend for him as well. Just a great weekend from him. It was very, very obvious that Yuki Tsunoda is driving with a chip on his shoulder, not getting the seat at Red Bull over, and Liam Lawson getting the seat, which Liam Lawson, like I just mentioned, he had not a great weekend all weekend long, was nowhere near the front in any of the sessions, qualified, I think it was like 17th on the grid, 17th or either 16th, 17th or 18th, somewhere around there. Yeah, just not a good weekend for Liam Lawson at all. And Yuki used that. He delivered a great weekend all weekend long. He ended up finishing 12th. So he didn't finish in the points. But again, I think there was a lot of chaos in this, a lot of strategy with the wet and everything. But Yuki Tsunoda is definitely has cemented himself as a very, very talented driver, and that RB team, I think, is in a really, really good place. And again, I know it's only race one, but if you are Red Bull and you're looking at this weekend as a whole, and you saw how Yuki drove all weekend, and you saw how Liam drove all weekend, I'd be kicking myself as to why I didn't put Yuki in that spot, in that seat. I actually was talking to Chris about this before I recorded. I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Liam keeps going on how this weekend went, and he keeps going on this trajectory and not performing well. I could see Red Bull doing a swap like they did with Daniel Kvyat and Max Verstappen in 2016 going into Spain. They do a driver swap. Yuki promoted to Red Bull, Liam Lawson put back down, or like Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon. Pierre Gasly started the 2018 season, or no, 2019 season, 2019 season. And then after a couple races, they moved him back down and then moved Alex Albon up to Red Bull. So I sent that message to Chris, and Chris brought up a really good point. He said, I don't think ever put Yuki in a Red Bull because Yuki is so closely tied to Honda, and Honda is going to Aston Martin next year. So after this season, Aston Martin is going to be using Honda engines. So I think if Yuki were to go, so brought up that really good point, and that made me think, well, if Yuki is going to go anywhere, he's going to go to Aston Martin. Especially with Honda being on board, and then Adrian Newey designing those cars, I think that could be a really good place for Yuki. But yeah, wow, what a statement made from Yuki Tsunoda. What a great weekend. Very happy for him. And if I'm Liam Lawson and if I'm Red Bull, I think I'm hitting the panic button. I think I know it's only race one, but I think I'm hitting the panic button. Just all weekend, even in the dry conditions, Liam Lawson was nowhere near to the front, nowhere near Max Verstappen. I don't think anyone is ever going to be near Max Verstappen in that seat. I mean, that car is so specifically designed for Max Verstappen. I think until Max leaves Red Bull, none of the second drivers at Red Bull are ever going to have a shot of being anywhere close to Max. Just because that car is so specifically designed for him and for Max and Max's driving style. But I think I'm hitting the panic button a little bit. Now, I still think Red Bull, and I'll talk about this when I talk about my predictions for the driver, for the constructors title. I still think Red Bull has a really, really good shot at being in the top three. And honestly, I think Red Bull is a solid lock for second place. Behind McLaren. But I think if Liam Lawson has the season that is reflective of this first weekend, I think that will definitely let Ferrari sneak by, which I'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, Yuki Tsunoda's statement made. Nice job, Yuki. My next one is continuing on that similar vein. Red Bull. I have this written down. It says Red Bull is the tale of two different races this weekend. Max, being Max as always, really, really strong race, really strong weekend all the way through. He had a pretty quiet weekend. I don't think he led any session, but he was right there in the mix, right at the end. He almost, I think had this race been 1 or 2 laps longer, I think he would have gotten past Lando Norris to win the race. It was a very, very close finish between him and Lando. I still think Max is, Max is clearly one of the best driver, if not the best driver on the grid right now. Incredible race for him. Great job for him. And then Liam Lawson had a weekend to forget. And if I were, again, like I said, if I were Red Bull, I might be thinking about hitting the panic button on Liam Lawson. He's had a lot of experience driving in Formula One now, at least more so than any of the other rookies. He has the most experience of any of the rookies, and he had one of the worst weekends. So yeah, just really, really, really terrible weekend for Liam. Great weekend for Max. And I think if they are going to keep having that, where Max has a really great weekend and Liam has a really, really terrible weekend, they're never, ever, ever going to be anywhere close to McLaren. Because McLaren, they look like, right now, they look like the solid lock for the championship. They are starting off this season where they ended it. Extremely strong, winning races, getting on the podium, racking up a ton of points. So even though even though Oscar had a really unfortunate spin, he was still able to recover and finish in 7th place. So really, really strong weekend from Oscar. Just got a little bit unlucky at the end. So if Red Bull cannot get their act together, they're going to be nowhere near close to McLaren. Even if Max were to win every single race, he'll win the drivers' championship, but they're never going to be close to winning the constructors' championship. So lastly, the last thing I have, and I mentioned this at the start, but I really hope that the rookies had quite the learning experience this weekend. It was a baptism by fire. Congrats on your first race. You get a wet one. So I think it will. I think it'll be better next race when they go to China. At least right now, I don't think there's any rain in the forecast to race at the race in China. But yeah, what a weekend for the rookies. Whew. I'm sure they're glad to put that one behind them. So those are my personal takeaways. Now I'm going to pull up my text messages, and I'm going to talk about Chris's takeaways. He sent me his first takeaway, and I totally agree with this. McLaren has established themselves as title favorites with Lando beating Max, in conditions that favor Max. So Max is easily one of the best drivers in the wet conditions, in Formula One right now. And Lando Norris beat him head on. So that should tell you how fast that car is. And even Oscar Piastri was putting it to Max a little bit too, in there, and was staying really, really close to Max, or at one point ended up passing Max and was faster than Max purely based off of pace in conditions that favor Max. So with that being said, I absolutely agree with what Chris says. McLaren has 100% established themselves as title favorites. And I think it's going to take Red Bull a lot to be able to compete with McLaren, especially considering how their driver lineup is. Where you got one really strong driver and one driver with now after this weekend, a lot of question marks over them. So his number 2 take, and I actually just said this, but Ferrari are still not ready to legitimately fight for a title and likely won't this year. That strategy was atrocious. Yes, I 100% agree. Ferrari this weekend seemed very reactionary. Whereas the likes of McLaren, Red Bull with Max, and Mercedes, they were thinking ahead. They were like, okay, how can I put myself in a position like with the wet tires at the end? They, Ferrari tried to play it like, oh, we could just stay out on slicks, even though it was pouring. It was pouring, and the rest of the teams were like, yeah, we need to put intermediates on. This is not like, let's think about the end of the race. This is not good conditions for slick tires. And then once Ferrari saw everyone else on the intermediates, and it wasn't until after they saw them that the intermediates were faster, then they reacted and pitted Charles and Lewis for intermediate tires, and they came out in 10th and 11th. They were able to claw themselves back up to 10th and 8th, but yeah, just absolutely atrocious from Ferrari. They're very reactionary in a sport where you have to think ahead, and they're just not. And so, yeah, I agree with this. Number 3, again, I've already mentioned this, but Antonelli is the real deal. But it was a tough day to be a rookie otherwise. Bortoleto also acquitted himself while driving a refrigerator. Bortoleto, yeah, he did end up crashing out of the race, didn't finish, but he did have, up until then, he was driving a solid race. He wasn't in the points, but I mean, he was driving a pretty solid race. So I was impressed by him. He just got really, really unlucky at the end. But yeah, Antonelli, wow, what a race. Number 4, this is what he has. He says, Yuki Tsunoda with a huge FU to Red Bull, making a statement. It should have him in the car, and Lawson's season just got that much harder this weekend. So I absolutely agree. If it were me, I'd put Yuki in that seat in a heartbeat. Put Liam Lawson back in the RB. Yuki Tsunoda, I think over the past, not just last season, but the past several seasons, has proven with the car that he's had, he has always been able to outdrive his car, outperform what his car is capable of. And he has grown up a lot since his rookie season, being very hot-headed. He's grown up a lot, and I just think it's Yuki's time to get a shot at that Red Bull seat. I really do think that. So his 5th takeaway, Williams may be more than best of the rest, and I absolutely agree. You typically have your top 5 teams, and then best of the rest is like that 5th or 6th place. I absolutely think that Williams is 100% going to be best of the rest this year. You have your top 4, and then I 100% in 5th place, I think, is going to be Williams. They have shown this weekend that not just in the race, but even not just this weekend, even in testing, Carlos Sainz set the fastest lap for one of the days in testing. in a Williams, not a Ferrari, a Williams, set the fastest lap of a day of this. I believe it was the second day of testing, set the fastest lap. So I 100% believe that Williams will be extremely competitive, and the midfield should be very afraid of Williams. Very afraid of Williams. And lastly, number 6, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, he says Australia deserves to be the season opener forever and always. And I could not agree more. What an awesome race that we had this weekend. Just a fantastic race from start to finish. We had safety cars, we had crashes, we had wet turning into dry, going back to wet. With 6 rookies, I think in this case, any track would have been like this. But with all of that, and then having 6 rookies on the grid, I think Australia needs to be the season opener every single year. What an awesome race that we had here in Australia. I'm so excited that Formula One is back. And we were treated to a very, very awesome season opener. So hats off to Australia, hats off to the track, hats off to that being our season opener, because wow, what a race. And now that we're officially back, I'm so stoked for the rest of this Formula One season. Less so because I'm a Ferrari fan, but, season's early. All right, so that concludes our takeaways from this race and from the weekend. So I'm going to end today's episode with, I'm going to give my new prediction based off of just week 1, how I think the constructors will end for the rest of how the Constructors Championship will go for the rest of the season, how it will end when we get to Abu Dhabi at the end of the season. So I've already mentioned this, but I'm going to go, sorry, not McLaren. I'm going to go from last to first. I think no obvious change here. I actually had Kick Sauber in last place, but I'm moving Haas to last place. They very clearly look like the worst car on the grid. They ran a poor race. They qualified P20 and P19. They were the last on the grid to start. I just don't see them going anywhere this season. So I'm putting Haas in 10th place. And so, yep, 10th place goes to Haas. In 9th place, despite having a pretty solid race and Nico Hülkenberg actually finishing in 7th place in the points, I'm still going to put Kick Sauber in 9th. I think they are. I think this was just. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I think this was just a fluke from Nico Hülkenberg. I think they played the strategy really well. Nico Hülkenberg has always been pretty decent in the wet, so I think this was a fluke from Nico in a positive way. I think, but I think with that car and the design of that car, I just don't see them getting any higher than 9th place. I hope I'm wrong, because this was a really, really great showing from Nico Hülkenberg, and Bordetella as well had a pretty decent race until he crashed out at the end. Again, I think he just got unlucky, but really strong from Nico Hülkenberg. I hope I'm wrong in this one. I really hope I'm wrong. So going into 8th place, despite also having a pretty strong weekend, I'm going to put Alpine in 8th. I'm going to put Alpine. Again, this is another one where I hope I'm wrong. I really, really hope I'm wrong. But I just, from what I've seen from testing and what I've seen from this first race, I don't think I could probably put Alpine in 7th. I think that who I have in 7th, Alpine and the team I have in 7th could flip-flop. It could go either way, but right now I'm putting Alpine in 8th. Just because in 7th place I have Aston Martin, and the reason why I have Aston Martin in 7th place is because, one, Fernando Alonso is a very talented driver. I'm not going to talk about Lance Stroll because Lance Stroll is Lance Stroll. But the reason why I have them in 7th, they didn't have a great weekend. Fernando Alonso crashed out. Lance Stroll did not finish in the points. But I think the fact that Adrian Newey has been hired on, and I think they started off rough, but we've always seen Aston Martin in the past. Since they've become Aston Martin, they start off one place, and then they just tank throughout the season. Everyone else passes them, and they definitely lose the upgrade battle throughout the season. But I think with Adrian Newey being hired on, he didn't design this car. This car is not his. But I think with the upgrades, and with Adrian Newey helping with those, I think they'll be able to progress a lot quicker this year than they have in the past. So that's why I put Aston Martin in 7th. But again, with Aston Martin and Alpine, I could switch them, and I could see them finishing in either 7th or 8th place. In 6th place, I have RB, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. I have the Racing Bulls in 6th place. I think they had a very strong weekend. They had a strong weekend. I feel really gutted for Isaac Hadjar with how he ended the race before it even started. I do feel really, really bad for him. I feel really gutted for him. But I do think they both Yuki and Isaac are really talented drivers. I can't justify putting them in the top 5 with who I have in the top 5. I just don't see them beating, Williams, Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, or McLaren. I just don't see them beating them. I think if they could beat one of those teams, it'd be Williams. But I think right now Williams, it would come down to the driver lineup. Yuki is very strong, but Isaac is a rookie. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon both have really, really strong Formula One experience. And I just think that as a driver lineup, that team will be stronger. And that's why I have Williams in 5th place above RB, because I truly believe that, one, Williams has designed a very fast car, comparatively speaking to where they have in the past. That car's not competing for a title, nowhere near close. But they've designed a pretty strong car comparatively to where they have been in the past, especially if you remember the 2019 season, how horrible that team was. So I just really think that Williams has a really, really strong case for being 5th place. They got a really strong driver lineup. They've got a good thing going with their team. So yeah, I'm putting Williams in 5th place. Up next in 4th place. In 4th place, I'm going to have Mercedes. I have Mercedes. They had a really, really strong weekend. The reason why I know they finished ahead of both drivers finished ahead of both Ferraris this weekend. They finished ahead of both those drivers this weekend. But I think with how strong the preseason testing and especially the shakedown. Oh, hello, cat. Everyone say hi to my cat. With how strong, and especially with Charles and Lewis being the driver lineup for Ferrari, I still see Mercedes finishing behind Ferrari. I think Mercedes have a really, really strong thing going, but I just historically with how they've progressed in the modern ground effect era with the car platform from 2022 till now, I don't think that they will have the progression of the upgrades like the top 3 teams will. So yes, Mercedes did finish ahead of Ferrari this weekend, but I still think Mercedes is going to finish 4th. I will say the 2nd through 4th though is going to be close. It is anyone's battle from 2nd through 4th. And speaking of the top 2nd through 4th, in 3rd place, I am putting Ferrari. Now, this is drastically different from where I put them at my preseason prediction. I said Ferrari. I think Ferrari's gonna outrace McLaren this season. And after this weekend, again, I'm not pressing the panic button yet, but I cannot, in good faith, say that Ferrari has a chance to compete for the title. In fact, I think, in my opinion, the only way that Ferrari can legitimately compete for 2nd place is if Max is the only driver that finishes in the points each week. I think if Liam finishes out of the points every single race this season, I think then Ferrari could have a chance of getting 2nd. But right now, I just don't see Ferrari competing for 2nd. Now, if 2025 goes like how 2024 went for Red Bull, and if 2025 goes how 2024 went for Ferrari, I do think Ferrari could, with how they've progressed through last season, how Ferrari managed to pick up the pace throughout last season and finished really, really strong. I do think Ferrari could finish second, but right now I just think Max and Red Bull, that car is too strong, and Ferrari, I think they need to make some major changes to that car. I'm hoping they just got the setup wrong for Australia. They go into China and everything's all good. But in winter testing and in the shakedown, the drivers did mention that there were some things that were wrong with the car that they noticed that they're working on. And I think until they get those worked out with the upgrades, I just don't see Ferrari finishing higher than third. Which in second place, I'm putting Red Bull. Max is an incredibly strong driver. And I think they've built a really, really strong race car. They built a very fast race car this year. And purely the reason why I think I have them finishing second is there are a lot more question marks around their driver lineup, especially the second driver, comparatively to where McLaren is with their driver lineup. I think McLaren has a much stronger driver lineup than Red Bull. Even though Max is the best driver on the grid right now, there's so many question marks over the second seat. And in order to win the constructors title, you need both drivers doing well. And so that's why I cannot justify putting Red Bull in first place. And the only team left in first place, I think I said it I said it earlier in the episode, but I totally think that McLaren, they're the lock for the championship. I think they're the championship favorites right now. They had a very strong preseason testing. They had a very strong weekend all together. And yeah, I think they're out for blood this year. I think they're going to have a really strong season. I'm so incredibly excited for them. Again, I'm a Ferrari fan, and that hurts my heart to say as a Ferrari fan talking about McLaren. But yeah, I think McLaren 100% is a lock for the Constructors Championship. They had an incredible weekend, and I just don't think that I don't see them putting a foot wrong this season. They may have one or two slip-ups here and there, but with how strong both Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris are as drivers, and with how fast that car is and how good that car is, I think they're the lock for the championship. So that is my constructors prediction. I'll go over it again, just super rapid fire. In 10th place, I have Haas. In 9th place, I have Kick Sauber. 8th is Alpine. 7, Aston Martin. 6, Racing Bulls. 5, Williams. 4, Mercedes. 3, Ferrari. 2, Red Bull. And 1, McLaren. So there's always usually in my preseason prediction, there's always usually one really, really big blunder in my predictions. So who will it be? Will we see one team finish higher or one team finish lower than I predicted? I don't know. So that concludes our Australian Grand Prix race review episode. If you have any extra thoughts that I did not mention or any points, please feel free to let us know down in the comments and let us know, what did you think of Australia? Did you think it was a great race? Do you think it should be the season opener every year? Or do we need to go back to Bahrain being the season opener? Let us know what you think. I hope everyone enjoyed the Australian Grand Prix, and we'll see you next after the Chinese Grand Prix.